Good morning and welcome to the Deep Dockets podcast. I'm your host, Brian Abercrombie. With me, as always, co-host Nida Wood and co-host Samuel Sanchez. How you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
All good.
Good, good. It's been a sec
like
since
a
we've been on.
tableside guacamole, like all the good things mashed up together.
Right.
Yep.
It's been a second since we've recorded. How's your summer been? Vacays? It looks like you got some sun, Sam, Nida.
Yeah.
You always look
surfing.
You always look
sun.
perfect.
It's the bad lighting.
Looks like we all got a little sun.
Yeah.
I think we all went to Florida this year, didn't we? Different times.
Y'all went to Florida. I went to Hawaii, so I got some sun there. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd trade you. Let's flop that.
Right. I'll definitely do
too.
I'd definitely rather
Nice
go to Hawaii
waters.
than Florida. All right. Well, it is back to school time. Today is the first day of school for my youngest daughter. I know, Nida, you've got some kids at the first day of school, so we can talk about that. We can talk about, how that applies in family law and the different things that come up as we could call it a smorgasbord of back to school issues for family law. Because there's a lot of stuff that always comes up after summer vacay and after summer visitation, summer possession schedules end, and all the different things that come up with school. We can talk about that. But first, we always go into the celebrity deep divorce situation. So we can't disappoint the listeners and do something different. So, Sam, you want to talk about Brittney and Kevin?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Our favorite girl, pop star, Brittney.
Our favorite girl, Brittney. I tell you, obviously, she continues to just figure out ways to complicate her life, I feel like.
It's a polite way of putting it, I think.
Her and Instagram, they have like this funny relationship. I feel like that she uses it as a medium to like keep herself in the news. But unfortunately, that isn't always a positive thing. Obviously, most recently, it's that, her ex, Kevin, with their children is like, hey, I'm leaving LA. I want to get out of this environment. And he's actually going to Hawaii, someplace that Nida really loves to hang out with. And
can't blame him for Hawaii.
And that's a huge modification, and it's something that we've talked about in the past, like, changing a geographic restriction because they have one, which is, the kids have to stay within a certain parameters of where she lives. And they haven't always had the best relationship. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, she's already conceded to letting them go, but that's not something that happens very often. Most parents are really like adverse to letting their children get further away from them because we know how distance affects the relationship between parents and children. Courts know it. That's why they impose these geographic restrictions. So, she's always a hot mess. And I know this is not going to be easy on any of them, but it does seem like probably, the dad is really kind of trying to get the kids out of the whirlwind tornado that seems to be Brittney Spears.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. I mean, the court's determinations on geographic restrictions, they always seem to be very, very fact intensive. So you're talking about how often is the other parent seeing the kids? What's the relationship like? Is it going to be best for them? What's their living conditions and friends situations and all the things that go on with kids going to be at the new place? It's just such a fact intensive inquiry. It's very, very difficult to forecast these for clients or tell clients how they're going to go. I mean, it's one of those things where you opt on the side of it's likely not going to happen. But sometimes there are some extenuating circumstances where the court will allow it, and a lot of that depends on the non-custodial parents' relationship with the kids.
Yeah, agreed. And I didn't know she had conceded, so that makes it easier for him. But I guess in some other cases that I've seen, the parent moves, that's supposed to have the geographic restriction, and then the other parent is fighting it to see, do we need to make them move back or not? And that's going to be, like Brian said, very fact intensive also, and they're looking at what makes the place that they moved to a better place than where they were. And they're looking at the doctors, the friends, the parents' relationship with the kids, and how is that going to make their life better? And how's it going to impact the relationship with the parents versus the kids? And obviously, if the parent's not seeing the child that much, that's not going to affect it that much at all.
I would also say that if you're Brittney, it helps to have a private jet. So
That's true.
The fact that Brittney has a private jet, I think that makes the geographic restriction a little bit easier, right?
Yeah,
For
for
sure.
sure. In that best interest inquiry, I think it's really kind of applicable across the continental United States, regardless of what jurisdiction you're in, at least the Florida and Texas ones that we know so well.
Yep.
It's absolutely the way the judge looks at it, right? So they just kind of, they're going to weigh what that relationship looked like to Nida's point, but I think they also counterbalance that with like, what's the best environment for them. And obviously LA and Brittney, they have this pretty toxic relationship, no pun intended, toxic. But I think that anytime a judge gets involved, parents have to worry.
Yeah.
Because to your point, Brian, that you just never know. It's a fist fight, right? You get into something like that and people don't agree and they get sideways and you just don't know what's going to be the little thing or the big thing that convinces a judge to either open it or close it down.
Yeah, and it's tragic either way. I mean, most people don't have a private jet, so when you're a workaday parent, and you want to see your kids on a regular basis, these geographic restrictions, that's what they're there for. They're not designed to punish anyone. They're designed to give everyone an equal shot at having a good relationship and a meaningful quality relationship with their kids, but it obviously doesn't always work. All right, next celebrity divorce. Let's move along. Kevin Kostner. You want to tell us anything about Kevin?
Well,
Mr. Kostner, Mr. Dances with Wolves, Mr. Star of 1,000 movie. Yeah, Mr. Yellowstone.
He's the king of the world right now, except for in his home, which he can't get into. Celebrity divorces, they're always a trip. But I would tell you one of the things that we talk to clients a lot about is when you leave your house, right? Whether it's a freaking 10,000 square foot mansion in Wyoming, or it's, your 2,500 square foot, castle in Dallas. Wherever it is, the second that you leave, you open yourself up to very complicated litigation. And I think that's what Kevin did, right? Kevin was like, I'm out. You're freaking crazy, you nut job. And I can't deal with you. Well, the problem that he has now is he's like, I want my house back. And she's like, fuck off. Like, this is not your house until the court says it's your house. I'm going to stay here. And so then you go into these massive negotiations and there's huge expenses. And that's just for him in regular life, everyday people. You're sitting there going, hey, I'm paying this mortgage. I have to pay rent. I can't keep paying on both fronts. I'm not Kevin Costner. I don't have this unlimited wealth that's, stacked piled on and, residuals that are getting paid to me. And that's a tough spot to be in. But yeah, Kevin, boy, he picked a doozy. She's a trip. I love there was some story, which is kind of silly, but she was going to Target, right? She's carrying a $25,000 Birkin bag or some crap like that. And she's like, I need money. I'm so broke. I have to shop at Target. And I was like, that's smart lawyering. Let's just give it to the lawyer. The lawyer's like, look, I don't want to see you in freaking Neiman's. I don't want to see you in freaking Nordstrom's. I don't want to see you at Barney's or Bloomingdale's. I want to see you at Target. But she's like, hell yeah, with my Birkin bag. I'm like, what the, okay, whatever.
So broke, I have to shop at Target.
Yeah.
Oh, woe is me.
Such a terrible place.
Yes. Woe is me. I have to shop down with you peons, you common folk at Target.
In her brand new Lambo, I think she went out and before, he was so pissed off because before she filed or he filed, she knew it was going to happen. So she went out and bought this crazy expensive car. And she was like, yeah, you're paying for that and taking my chunk of the house. I mean, he's got a rock solid prenup. So, he wasn't an idiot. His lawyer was looking out for him, which is something we've talked about in the past. But, when you're a celebrity and you just, you drop out and then you're like, that happened to Kelly Clarkson too. Remember where she was like, hey, I can't get my freaking soon to be ex-husband out of the house. He's like, F off. I'm not fucking leaving. I'm like, you're going to have to bomb me out.
Plant my flag and I'm going to stay.
Yeah, until the judge tells me otherwise. And even then, maybe I won't leave. So, it's just it's a colossal mistake that I think they make a lot, but they have the luxury to be able to do that. So
I mean, most people don't have the finances to fight on both fronts. I mean, Kev could go down the street and get himself another 10,000 square foot house and put a big middle finger in the yard pointed at her house if he wants to. True. But most of us can't do that, right?
True.
All right, and let's talk on the child custody front. Let's talk about Bennifer, the new incantation of Bennifer. We got Ben Affleck, we got Jennifer Lopez, we got Jennifer Garner. He likes him. He's got a type. Ben's got a type. So
hot brunettes.
A name type at least.
Jennifer type.
Yeah, exactly. He likes the name. He's like, yeah, I got the tattoo, so I'm just gonna
What's
stick
what's
with that
going on
name.
with
And
our what's going on with Mr. Affleck?
well, so obviously, the good news is he's remarried. He seems to be doing much better. He seems to be, dealing with his addiction. I think we talk about Ben Affleck and the Jennifers in the context of like a good, relationship to look at. This is the, blended families on multiple fronts. They seem to be working well together. They take vacations together, spend time together. They seem to communicate very well, are very supportive of one another, and that's
Do we
atypical.
think do we think that that's the publicist's work, or spinning that yarn, or do you think we actually think that they're doing this co-parenting thing, which looks like it looks like it's a benefit to all these kids, you know, or do we think that's the publicist's spin on what's really going on?
Yeah, I Nida's the intuitive one. I just kind of read stuff and say, yeah, that's pretty much what's going on. But
I mean, I think they're good at co-parenting because for as far as like a publicist goes, I think they can probably, and it might be a little bit of both, I don't know, but I mean, they don't have to take vacations together. They can probably do other things where they're showing in the public image that they're co-parenting, but a vacation I think is something that a lot of times like parents, they'll do it for the kids and making sure they're making memories with the family and whatnot. And as far as when Ben and Jennifer got married and whatnot, I think they kind of coordinated that so that the kids could be around or not be around for the different things and working together on that. So, I mean, hopefully it's a good co-parenting thing because that's always a good thing for the kids.
So let me ask you a question. So have you guys ever been down to the Atlantis in the Bahamas, the resort? So they have multiple towers. Okay. So my question is this. Okay, if Ben and Jennifer are over in this tower, and the other Jennifer is over in this tower with whoever her husband is, whatever the situation is, are they really vacationing together? I mean, there's 50,000 rooms and 50,000 people between the two of them. They're technically at the same resort, but they might as well be in two different cities.
Well, that probably makes it more palatable because it is very atypical to vacation with your ex
That's true.
and the new spouse and whatnot. So maybe some things they would do together with the kids, and hopefully the other things they can have their own vacation.
yeah, little
Yeah.
dinners together, something.
Yeah.
I don't think that, when you look at co-parenting in any context, whether you're a superstar or just a regular person, it doesn't have to be huge. A lot of
Yeah.
times it's these little things that, to Nida's point, allow the family unit to continue to coexist in a new way, right? It allows kids to be the central focus for both families and understand that they can be comfortable in either environment. And it doesn't have to be all or none. It can be some and some, which I think is kind of what I see, at least between these two families, which is they're like, obviously they're super famous and have their own kind of agendas and things that are going on in their lives. But in the same token, they do take moments and plan out moments to say, we're going to share some of these so that we have these common memories that I think are really important to kids. When you think about it as a family unit, they kind of really want to feel like, hey, it doesn't matter where I'm at, wherever I'm at with my family, I'm going to be comfortable and they're going to be comfortable with me. Yeah, it's always the most uncomfortable thing. Like I would tell you, like it's a personal story. Like for my parents got divorced and you could not get the two people in the same room. It was like, I mean, freaking daggers, like, like everybody was like, oh, hell, this is going to turn into a freaking disaster. So to know that you can like have both parents in the same room and it be calm and everybody like just kind of enjoy their time, regardless of how long that is or what you're doing. I think that's a great thing.
So some therapist out in the LA area or wherever probably deserves a medal or a raise or did one heck of a job. But it's a good segue into kind of where we're talking about the co-parenting piece, at least is a good segue into talking about, okay, we're going back to school. We've got blended families. We've got all kinds of, of these kinds of issues coming up. Kids are going back to school. They're starting the school possession schedules back. The school activities are kicking into full gear. If ever there was a time for co-parenting, I think it's when school's in session and the kiddos, especially when you have multiple kiddos or in activities. I think nobody can be all things to all people, especially if you got two working parents. Um, what are some of the things that you guys have seen come up that are issues that have come up in these and going back to school, all that kind of stuff. The first thing I've noticed, obviously, is people getting the calendar wrong. Sometimes takes them a good discussion with their lawyer or a thorough reading of the calendar to understand, especially if they're newly divorced or whatever, what the Thursday night, overnight looks like in this Texas standard possession order, and some of that stuff. And then what are the simple things with activities? Like, are you required to take the kiddo to soccer practice on your night? What if you don't like soccer? What if you don't want to do that? I mean, what are all those kinds of issues? What have you guys seen?
Nida, you want to take that
Sure.
first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've seen several different things. So for one, like after long breaks with one parent, they may not be very happy with the way things are going, or maybe they're having more fun with the other parent, the fun parent during the summer break. We saw that a lot during the COVID lockdown too, where we saw a lot of modifications after that long lockdown where they're sick of being with one parent, or they want to flip custody, or maybe try to do more of a 50-50. And then some other issues I've seen is some schools, they do have a fall break in October for about a week, but the standard possession order doesn't really have that fall break built in. So what are you doing during that time? Are you treating it like a normal regular school term and alternating the days, or are you guys going to work together and co-parent to figure out how we're going to split this fall break? And something that we probably need to think about and or modify if we can't reach an agreement on how we're going to split this fall break moving forward. I've also seen some people, in addition to having some schools having a spring break, they'll have some kind of other break in the February months or somewhat around there. And same issues with that. The extracurricular activities, I mean, that's always an ongoing issue, regardless of, whether it's after summer break or during the school year, because what if one parent wants to sign the kiddos up for one activity and the other parent doesn't agree to that? Then how is that going to be paid for? How's that going to be split? And if the other parent doesn't agree, are they going to take the child to that activity and practices, even if it's their time? And, that's something that comes up a lot. Well, it's my time. I don't need to be taking the child to this activity. What if I want to go do something else?
That reminds me of the case you had, Sam, with the poor kid that wanted to play football, and dad was pro football, mom was anti football, so the kid went to exactly less than half of the practices, right?
Yeah, it was a train wreck. Yeah, I mean,
and the poor kid couldn't even go in the games because he didn't know the plays, he didn't know what to do, and the coach couldn't play him because he couldn't risk it.
Yeah.
Well, and really, go ahead, Nida.
I feel like that just doesn't benefit the child. Like the child's the one that's losing there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, to Nida's point, like when the challenge for a parent is, and for a judge, right? Your child comes back to you after 30 days with their dad or mom, 45 days, 42 days, whatever it is, and they're like, "Hey, I don't want to go back. Like I had a terrible time." They don't have rules, or they come back in the reverse. Like, I want to stay there. I don't want to come back. Like, they don't have rules, or I love their atmosphere. They have a pool, they let me do what I want, or, I just like the structure, or they have siblings, and this other place where I'm at, I don't have siblings. The myriad of things that can come up that cause modifications are limitless. The challenge really for parents, I feel like, is trying to evaluate what's grounds to modify, right? In every state, there's a minimum, there's a threshold that you have to meet. You can't just come in and say, like, I want to change it unless you're agreed, right? If you have an agreement, freaking change everything you want to. But if there's not an agreement, there's a threshold. And that threshold, that legal threshold, is a challenge. Because what a judge looks at is, like, one, obviously, is it in this child's best interest to change this order? But two, like, what is the history, right? What is the
change in circumstances?
Yeah, like, so I give it to them as this, like an example, like a river, right? Rivers flow the way they flow for hundreds of years. You can look on any map and see how the Mississippi's been flowing for 100 years. That's the way a judge looks at your life. They look at the map of your life and the way the water's been flowing to decide whether or not I want to change the course of that river. And it usually takes something substantial, not just a little log in the freaking way. It's like a major, road.
Gotta have a boulder in the water, huh?
Yeah, to change the course of that water for them. And it still has to be, so that's one, a big thing. And two, that big thing is what's in the child's best interest. So it can't just be like, hey, they hate you now because they love having pizza and no homework at dad's. And so I'm going to change it. No. So, modifications are a lot more complicated than I think people really anticipate when they try to go in and get them. And parents, a lot of times that's where they'll get sideways, to Nida's point, right? You come in and you're like, hey, that's all well and good, but that's not going to work. I don't like it. And so how do you talk to your kids? Because then that makes nobody wants to be around a pissed off teenager. I'm sorry. Pissed off teenagers are like tough. And so as a parent, you're like, well, I don't want to piss them off. I want them to be here, but I don't want to give that up either, because there's financial implications, right? You're talking about child support too. Hey, you flip time, you flip child support. Well, people like live to their means most of the time. I don't care how rich you are. And so if you're taking that money in and you're spending it on a monthly basis, and now somebody says, hey, we're going to change it and you're going to have to pay the other person, holy shit. That's not the way my budget is built. So, those are all things that modifications really deal with, and parents should really kind of contemplate and talk to a competent lawyer about, so that they really know their footing.
And sometimes it's not just the custody flip. I've had cases where, and this judges a lot of times don't necessarily like these kind of modifications, but they do come up, where you're just modifying some of the terms of the conservatorship, where you're asking for, I've had cases where people have asked for specific things. Like there was one where this girl was really, really good at, I can't think it was horse dressage or equestrian, some kind of horse activity. And she had to do it every day. She didn't go to school. She was homeschooled. One parent was all about it. The other one wasn't, but she was like, going to the Olympic level at this sport. And, we had to go get an injunction on this thing, and, and get an order from the court that required both parents to take the child to the activity. And then we had another time where the kid was really good at track, and he was on the scholarship level, and dad didn't think it was important, and because dad wanted to go fishing in Rockport, and the kid had track meets, and we ended up with an order from a judge that said dad will take the child to activities. So there is there's the slider modification, where they're just modifying certain things, where the custody is not flipped, but most of the time judges are going to err on the side of parent can do what they want during their time. I think it's the extraordinary circumstances where you get an order that requires a parent to do something. Extraordinary circumstances. So I would tell you that if you're going to go down there and file a modification and say, hey, I don't really want to flip the custody, but I really want him to take little Johnny to soccer practice, every Tuesday and Thursday, or whatever it is. I don't know that you're likely to get that order unless it's some kind of, really extenuating circumstance. I think I see typically at the end of summer, like you're talking about, at the end of a long summer break, you're seeing things like, well, everything's crap over at the one place. And especially if there's toxic parents, on either side, there's normally one parent spending the bulk of the time just absolutely propagandizing the child about how bad it is at the other place, or whatever, to try to get that custody flipped. And obviously that's just a alienation form of manipulation that's terrible for kids. And so you see that a lot, and you see modifications arise out of that. But it's a tough either way. But like Nida was saying, that school districts, they'll change their policies, and some of them have fall breaks, some of them don't. There was a situation that came up that, okay, what if the kid gets out of school and the standard possession order says, okay, from school, release on Thursday to when school resumes on Friday. This is actually a real world thing that's come up. However, it's not their weekend, but they get the Thursday night overnight, right? Because they're the non-custodial parent. Under the possession order, you get the Thursday night, right? Until school resumes is what the order says. What if school doesn't resume till the following Monday because of the holiday, but it's not your weekend? That's been a source of contention for many families. Or they put in some kind of a break where there's a carryover to Tuesday or whatever. What about those things?
Yeah, I guess you just have to look to see how your order is worded, specific language as well. But if, then there's that catch-all where if there isn't a specific time for the possessory parent, then the parent that doesn't have the possession order has all times not designated for the possessory conservator. And then some people just default on that.
Yeah, but when do you give that kiddo back? If it says at the time school resumes,
Yeah, I
when you
don't
get out
know. I
on
mean, it just
Thursday.
depends on, yeah, it just depends on how your orders work, because I've seen some that say that if there's no school in session, then it's going to be at 8 a.m. that morning, and then you drop back off to that parent. I've seen some that say at 6 p.m. So it just depends. Very specific, I think, to your order.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
it's
I think to
just
your point, Brian, I think you said like you can modify orders in a limited fashion. I think that's one of those times, right? So if you encounter these issues, like parents will come up against something that they're like unanticipated, right? We as lawyers, I'd love to tell you that we get everything right. That from the first draft, everything is perfect, and we anticipate all the freaking problems that you're going to have, and
in
it
16
answers
years.
everything. Right. But I would tell you that this is not the case. Like parents continue to create new and fascinating problems for themselves that lawyers have to fix. And so if you run up against something like that where you're like, damn, my order freaking is not clear, we'll freaking fix it. You know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't help you in that initial situation, but then yeah, absolutely follow modification to say, hey, we need to resolve that, because that's just a problem that we're solving for ourselves in the future, right? It's not going to come up again. The worst advice I think parents get, or that they do, and maybe they're not advised to do it, but they have a terrible order and they don't fix it. They just keep fighting. They just
Right.
keep having like these encounters, and it's just miserable. And then they just get sideways. And the person, obviously both families suffer, but the children hate that. Like when you talk to
Yeah.
kids, and a big part of that too, I guess I wanted to make this point is, modification, depending on the age of the child, they're going to get to participate in that process. Their perception, their perspective is going to be utilized by the court, depending on their age, right? If they're smaller, maybe you get an attorney ad litem who's going to come in and like be able to tell the court, this is my perspective for the children and what you should do. If they're over a certain age, then they get to talk to the judge directly. Now, the judge doesn't do exactly what they say, but they use it as a backdrop, a very important backdrop to kind of listen to them and discern what's happening in the world, because everybody tells their story from their perspective. Best case, you go to court, holy shit, man, you're like the best Disneyland parent. Everything is perfect. This child loves their time with me. Oh my God. Like they love eating their broccoli. They love asparagus. Like if there's, like they always make their bed, and, no, that's not a kid. And the other side is like, hell no, this kid hates broccoli. He's allergic to asparagus. That freaking mom is torturing him, and it's like, so that experience with the children that the judge gets, whether it's from an ad litem or directly from the child, is very important in this process and modification, right? They get to use that backdrop to kind of figure out like, what do I want to do? Who do I believe? And so, it's a kind of poison pill. I tell parents this all the time. You never know what a kid's going to say. They could love being at your house. They could love you to death, but they get in front of a judge and their adrenaline's pumping and they're nervous, and they don't say a word about having problems at dad's house or mom's house, because they don't want to talk bad about them, right? Even though they'll tell you all these problems, they're not going to tell an outsider.
Exactly.
And so then the judge comes back and makes an order, and you're like, how could they not rule in my favor? Well, because they never really heard what was going on, because she wouldn't say it or he wouldn't say it. So, those are things that I think that, as you encounter these, I do encourage parents to fix problems within themselves if they can, fix an order if it's a bad order. But always keep in mind that just because your child tells you something doesn't mean that they're going to say it in court, and doesn't mean that they're going to say it the way they say it to you. They're not going to say it the same way they say it to the judge. It just doesn't happen that way most of the time.
I would also say, yeah, on the thing of modifying a bad order. I mean, a lot of times these orders, it's the best laid plans, right? A lot of times these orders work when they first, when they first assign them way back at the time of the divorce, but 3-4 years goes by, everybody moves on with their lives, so people get remarried, different things happen, and then sometimes relationships deteriorate even more, and then you've got two toxic parents going at each other all the time, and you had an order that worked when they initially, but you live in a real world, and you live in a world where everything's changing and people's relationships are changing and things are evolving and things like that, and things are always changing. So, and stuff with kids change and stuff with parents change. So, you had an order that worked, but now it doesn't work. So what do? You got to go back and deal with it, right? Um, you know, I think that it really takes a set of mature parents to co-parent in order, a very detailed, we negotiate them every day, right? We negotiate very detailed orders that have 50-50 possession schedules, and different things where certain holidays are shared, where we depart from all the normal stuff, right? And I say that those things only really work whenever the parents can really take a back seat and co-parent and kind of put their egos on the side, put their, hurt feelings to the side, and co-parent, because creative orders are great. Don't get me wrong. I mean, if that's your life and it works for you, then God bless you and go do it. But things change, circumstances change, people's lives change, people's attitudes change, everything like that is kind of evolving. So if you don't have an order that works, you got to go fix it. But at the same time, you want to try to negotiate as much stuff in the order as possible and avoid the courtroom, because if you end up in a courtroom, you're most likely going to get a judge that follows what the legislature has given him or her to follow. And you're going to get a standard possession order with standard child support, standard rights and duties, because that's what the legislature said is safe for these judges to do. And they don't like to think outside the box unless you absolutely have a really good reason to do so. And so, you gotta co-parent for a changing world, and you've got to put your feelings aside, and you've got to account for the changes that are gonna come, especially if you get divorced with young children.
Yep. And to add to that, the creative orders part and 50-50 time, how are you doing child support, with those creative orders and 50-50 time? So there's different ways to do it. And what are you guys splitting? And so you have to make sure, and I've seen this so many times, your order isn't enforceable the way it's written. And so either people start backing out, or they don't want to contribute their 50% to whatever they were doing. Or some people, they just say, I'm not going to do splitting certain things 50-50 or however they want to do it. We'll just stick to the standard child support, and I'll cover this and you'll cover that. But again, if that's not stated in your order, then that can backfire as well. And of course, with that, if you're doing creative orders and agreeing to splitting expenses for the kids a certain way, if your financials change, that's a contractual agreement. So that's something that's going to have to be relooked at potentially as well. And we'll see what the judge wants to do about that at that point.
I would also say that if you're a parent, you find yourself in a situation where you've got a kid that wants to modify an order, is adamant about it. Say they're over 12 years old and they're adamant about it. Really, really look at the circumstances, and really, really, really look at what's going on in this kid's life. What are the motivations? Is the child going to have to, all of the rudimentary things that you don't really think about? Is this child going to have to change schools? Our friend group's going to change. Our activity's going to have to change. All of those kinds of things are what the judge is going to look at as a best interest test as to whether or not it's appropriate to move this child from one parent and flip the custody and give it to the other. So if you're in a situation where your child is adamant about wanting to come live with you, or you're adamant about wanting to change the custody, I would really tell you to take the time to really look at all of the circumstances surrounding that child. Is the child going to have to do something as silly, or I wouldn't say silly, but I guess that's the wrong word, but something like changing doctors or dentists, or change, like I said, changing activities, changing schools. All of those things are very, very big for a young child. Those are the biggest events in their lives, like their friends at school, their activities, whatever's going on. So you really need to not just look at how your relationship is with your child, and it may be fantastic, but you also have to look at how that move is going to affect that child, and what that looks like. If you live 2 streets over from your ex-spouse, and you can go to the same school, then that's a little bit different situation than having to uproot a child and all of that kind of thing. So really, really look at what these factors look like before you go down that road.
Yeah, without a doubt. And what I mean? We know, I guess the other piece of what modifications come to light is schedules, right? So we've talked a little bit about support. We've talked a little bit about situations, but I think a big part of that too is schedules, children's schedules, parent schedules, right? So like vacations. I know everybody's like, hell, we just finished summer vacation. We don't think about anything else. But I would tell you that like now's the time to really review your order and think about the fall, right? These fall breaks, whether it's fall, the reverse spring break, fall break, or it's Thanksgiving, it's Christmas, it's, what does that holiday sequence look like?
Halloween is a big one.
Yeah. I mean, there's so
for
many
young kids.
Yeah. And there's so many holidays now that I think that parents don't really take into account. And even the big ones that are normally there, they want to change, right? And clearly if you're a good parent, you have the Bennifer relationship where you guys can work it out, then who cares what the order says? Nobody gives a shit. just freaking agree and do what you're going to do. That's great. But if you're on the flip side, you're the Kevin Federline Brittney relationship, then you better freaking start thinking about it now. And if it needs to change because there's issues with it, then anticipate it. You know, modifications, you know, everybody always asks the $2 million questions for us, right? How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? They're interrelated and you don't get to control either one.
Yep.
It can take freaking a month to do a modification, and it can take years to do a modification. So if you're like, oh, I want to modify this, and the other person isn't probably going to agree, but I have a trip planned for me and my child to go to a resort in Mexico. And the other parent's like, bullshit, you're not taking them out of the country. And the order is like confusing or unenforceable. Like, you don't file 3 weeks before the freaking trip. You're not going. You're not going.
Not without an emergency order, yeah.
Yeah. And so like, and in those situations, the judge is like, really, your vacation's an emergency?
Exactly.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
So
the judge is dealing with abused children, and your vacation to Mexico is an emergency.
Exactly.
No, not to that.
Oh my
not
God,
to that
I'm gonna
judge.
lose my deposit for my child. Oh, well, yeah, you should have thought about that months ago. So really take a look at those orders, those issues. We've been kind of talking about like how, you know, you already know as a parent, you've experienced the issues. And if you haven't, really kind of try to anticipate them, plan it out. Look at, hey, you know, this is dad's, you know, Christmas holiday, and he wants to go to Europe, and he's going to need more than the 10 days at the first part of the vacation. He's going to bleed into my part of the vacation, but I don't want to give it to him. Well, he's already booked the trip. Well, look, yeah, you're like, yeah, I'll deal with that in November when the vacation's in December. No, deal with it now. You know, really talk to a lawyer and figure it out and try to get some resolution of that, because it does take a long time for you to litigate these matters. You know, courts are obviously still pretty backed up post-COVID. And so
I would tell you that judges are human beings. They're not unreasonable. Like your Europe example, most likely if it's a trip that's going to be beneficial to a child, you know, for a life experience, they're probably going to allow it. But like you said, if you don't get in there fast enough, then you're going to be, as the great Dirty Harry used to say, you're going to be shit out of luck, you know?
So, you know, that'd be my advice. You know, I mean, modifications, we've kind of touched on all these different points, but I really think like you just have to, you know, really review your order, the all-encompassing facets that need to be changed, and then really try to get ahead of it if you can.
And to add to that, on a modification where you're asking for some kind of temporary relief, I mean, though that burden of proof is even higher. And a lot of counties, they'll make it an uphill battle for you to even get into court on a temporary basis on a modification. So you really have to know your courts and judges.
All kinds of, you got to have affidavits and all kinds of stuff. That's a great point, because if you even want to get a temporary something changed, the bar is even that much higher. It's even higher than getting it changed on a permanent. You know, you've got to have some good, because courts don't really like handling temporary hearings all the time. They don't like wasting their days on those kinds of things. So they want you to mean something when you go in there, right?
Yep.
Well, all
Absolutely.
right. I think we've killed this horse. So if you want to speak to any of us, you can go to our website, www.aswlawoffice.com, and you can, all of our numbers are on that website. It's probably easier to do it that way. All of our emails are on there, all of our contact information, fancy bios, all that kind of stuff. We are getting into the realm of mediation. So all three of us are going to be mediating cases. So we can mediate pro se cases. We can mediate cases with lawyers. We all three have extensive family law experience, decades of family law experience. So, you know, we're going to jump into that realm, you know, more significantly as mediators, which I think we feel like we can help a lot of families solve some of their problems. And, you know, we're going to tackle that realm. So am I missing anything?
I don't think so.
I always am.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think everybody knows where to find us. And I think we're going to have a lot of good topics to talk about through the fall. I think this is a good way to kick it off, get back.
Yep,
yeah, I mean,
agreed.
The school and everything, there's always a lot of stuff, a lot of stressors that go on in people's lives, especially us this morning.
Yes. And last night.
Exactly. Yep.
That coupled with a massive heat wave, you got a recipe for it.
Let's just keep the grid alive. Let's just keep the grid alive, and I think we'll avoid major problems.
We're only 90 degrees right now, so we're a little bit lower today. So.
Yeah, 90 in H-Town with like 90% humidity is like 115.
Yeah,
and I barely have any live grass in my yard because we're on a
Oh yeah,
water
my backyard's dead.
we're water restriction. We can only water a couple of days a week, and
Yeah.
it certainly just burns off that fast, even if you water like really like early in the morning or whatever. And
Yeah.
like so there's splotches in the yard.
Yeah. Our water restrictions, we're allocating our water to the front yard because people see that. The backyard, not so much. So,
Exactly.
dead back there.
Yeah. I always tell people, I'm a rancher's kid. So like, people would complain when it rained. It's like, I can't believe I don't want another day of rain. I tell them like, I'm never, ever going to complain about rain being from Texas because freaking I've lived through these summers where you're just like begging for a drop of rain. So hopefully, we're getting through August, which is the worst of it. And then it'll just freaking pour because we all need it. We all need it.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for the time today and enjoy the rest of your week. And we'll talk soon.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening to the Deep Dockets podcast, brought to you by Abercrombie, Sanchez, and Wood. You can find us at aswlawoffice.com, slide into our DMs, or go old school and give us a ring at 888-981-7509. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and all views are the opinions of the hosts. It's not designed to provide legal advice for your particular legal matter and should not replace the advice of competent counsel. So tune in next time because with over 40 plus years combined experience, these dockets go deep.